Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Tebow with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at Blast Think and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast. This episode of the Blast Report podcast is brought to you by Dyno Nobel. For over 150 years, Dyno Nobel has been a global leader in the commercial explosives industry. With origins dating back to Alfred Nobel himself, Dyno Nobel provides historic leadership in explosives, serving the mining, quarrying, civil, and construction industries. As one of the largest players in the industrial explosives business, Dyno Nobel's vital role in helping customers is highlighted across the world. From safety initiatives, development in bulk explosive technology, and meeting KPIs, Dyno Nobel understands the needs of their customers today and into the future. It's their full line of products and services that challenges the status quo and delivers on their promises. So when you need groundbreaking performance, you trust Dyno Nobel. Well, I got Baron Fidler here. Thank you for coming again on our podcast, sir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So last time we did this interview, we were in Savannah, Georgia, and we had a little faux pas with our audio. But I'm glad that you decided that you were able to come back and do another interview. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And
no, it happens.
We've got a few people have requested an interview with you. So it's kind of nice to know that someone's like, hey, let's make sure you get him on there. And, well, you want to get an opportunity to. We've probably seen you in presentations or met you over the years in conferences or at work. So. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess your role now, and then rewind all the way back to what your first day on the pattern was or how you got in the industry. So introduce yourself kind of now, your little bio that you'd give, and then go from there.
No problem. And good to be here with you, Evan. Currently, I'm with Dyno Nobel, been with Dyno Nobel for 29 years. And I work in our corporate accounts division. Corporate accounts is just your larger customers, multiple mining operations, maybe even covering multiple states, and work with our iron ore customers and our coal customers. So part of our corporate accounts team. Work in Dyno Nobel's corporate office in Salt Lake City, Utah. And that's where my family and I reside. We live in South Salt Lake City. Married, boy 13, dog 13, so not a huge family, but a good family to be a part of.
Doing some skiing out there?
A little bit of skiing. I like to do a little bit of upland bird hunting with the dog, and really that's about just being away from people and really having a chance to connect and think about some stuff. So it's not necessarily about all the hunting. I think it's more about the adventure and the activity, to be honest with you. But yeah, we do a little skiing and hiking and exploring around Utah. There's just lots to see, and we enjoy kind of those family, I call them dad trips,
Nice.
Where we're hitting a little town, seeing a little state park, maybe something off the beaten trail that just gets our family, out and engaged. So we enjoy that. But going back in time, I grew up in South Dakota, finished high school in '88. No plans. I was not a person that had a thought of, what was going to happen to me in the future. Finished high school, kind of middle of the pack, and decided I needed to go to college. I'd been working at a sawmill, stacking boards and washing dishes and that kind of stuff. And I knew that probably wasn't a career path for me for the long term. And so I started at South Dakota School of Mines, had a sister that had graduated from there and kind of rode her coattails to South Dakota School of Mines. Thought I'd go there for just 1 year and ended up staying and getting a degree in mining engineering in '93. I finished up in '93. And at that time, then went to work for...
well, before you go into that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're here at the Best in the West Conference. And were you one of the first scholarship recipients?
I was, and it's
something like that, right?
It's good memory too. So back in college, the Black Hills chapter, and then there was a Northern Plains chapter over in Gillette, but the Black Hills chapter had kind of I guess you could be a member. I'm going to try to remember here, but it wasn't very much money, maybe $5 or $10 or something like that. And you could go to the meetings, get a couple of beers, maybe some, a meal or whatever. So from a college budget standpoint, it was very enticing. And I got involved in the ISE Black Hills chapter back in the early 90s. The first scholarship recipients, there was 3 that year. Jim Daly, Audrey Walsh, and myself. And back then, the scholarship I received was about $250, which was very appreciative back then, right? I mean, your tuition was $1,000 kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, a little bit more economical. It's significant, yes. So one of the first recipients, and they had us come back at kind of the 20-year reunion and, make a little presentation and provide an update of, that their funds went to help us make a career in the mining industry.
And here you are, over 20 years later.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That's really cool.
So I've kind of kept that Black Hills chapter membership. And with that said, then a few years back, joined the board for the Black Hills ISE chapter. And that just led to, they're always looking for folks that want to lend a hand, and got on the Best of the West committee. And currently the last 3 years have been helping with the scholarships for students that we give out. So it is a kind of a full circle story, if you will. And it's a good story, I think, to be able to encourage students to apply, maybe stay in touch a little bit with them as they then, graduate and pursue their career paths and where it takes them, in the industry, whether it's equipment manufacturers or explosives or whatever that happens to be. It's a fun volunteer portion of my time. Let's put it that way.
And that it does make an impact. I mean, it's been 13 years since the last time I was at Best in the West, and I was a scholarship recipient.
That's great.
So this is cool to be coming back here, having my own booth, sitting here, and saying like, look, it's working. These scholarships make a difference. It makes an impact. So it's very cool.
It's very, you're absolutely right. Very exciting, right? That folks' monies that they donate, or the item that they buy at an auction, or the golf event that they participate in, that there is an end use that has a positive outcome for a student and for our industry.
And the mentorship too. And a lot of it, obviously some money is never not appreciated. But then when there's just guidance and people to, kind of say, oh, you can see yourself in that job or something like that, and you can say, okay, these people look happy in their career. They're all walking around this conference. Obviously, there's some people who look like they could have got a few more hours of sleep last night. But there's some people here who are all smiling. They work for competitors. They're still shaking hands and friends with people. So yeah, it's nice. And did your, so back to more about your startup, after you got your mining engineering degree and you were, seeing yourself at the Best in the West or the Black Hills chapter, did that initiate your first job, or were you still going to go work for a mining company, because they pay better than explosives companies, right? So a lot of times, a lot of people get into the business, as a student, they're like, oh, it'd be cool to do explosives. And then next thing you know, they're like, well, they'll make a lot more money doing short-term or long-term planning. So what was it how did that work for you? Did you get an internship, or did you switch off?
No, that's a really great question. I did have a summer internship at Black Thunder Mine one summer. I went to South Africa and worked for Johannesburg Consolidated Investments as a summer, right, to do underground hard rock. I mean, so,
that's
as a student, you're kind of trying to explore your options of, maybe where you'd like to end up, maybe doesn't always pan out, but, developing some industry contacts for sure. And so there was really about 3 folks that really helped me find a job within the explosive industry. And it wasn't that I was necessarily looking. In 93, the mining market was a little bit depressed. And so, I thought I wanted to, go to Alaska or go to Idaho and, work underground or something to that effect. And there wasn't a lot of opportunities. But in college, I had I helped put on a dinner program for young engineers, mainly men at the time, but kind of an engineered leadership, and had a speaker by the name of Bill Wallace. He was our speaker that, came over and talked about, how to act at dinner and how to have conversation and, try to be a little bit more professional, engaging, and through that, also raising money for our mining and mucking team, or for going to the ISC International. Back then it was not very high tech. We put together a little video, and it was on a VHS tape. And I went over to like the Society of Mining Engineers Gillette chapter and the Black Hills chapter, the Northern Plains ISE chapter, Black Hills chapter, just to ask for some money at the time. And we had like I said, a little video that we put together, and you're trying to get a few $100 to help send students to different activities, right? And through that, got to know Bill, a couple fellows at Jacobs Ranch Mine, is where Bill Wallace worked. Joe Haney, he was in Gillette. He worked for Intermountain Irico, the explosives company. Another fellow named Paul Anderson, he was at Jacobs Ranch Mine as a mine manager. So really that industry connection, and I encourage students to really develop that. That was really what allowed me to get my first job in the explosive industry.
So you had kind of set up this dinner for everyone else, and in the end, it helped you out a lot.
It helped me out more than I realized at the time, because I had made a connection, stayed in contact with that connection. Just like I said, when I went over to, ask for money, he was there, right? So you just develop a relationship, and I was graduating in May of '93, and it was about April time frame. I don't, maybe first part of April, and Joe Haney called and said, "Why don't you come over to Gillette and have a conversation with me about working with Intermountain Irico at the time," which was part of Dyno Nobel. But that role was really to provide an engineer at the Jacobs Ranch Mine. Kerr-McGee had Jacobs Ranch Mine, and that's where Bill Wallace worked. And so there was some activity in the background that I didn't realize that was going on, and they wanted to take their paperwork blast forms and put that onto a laptop and kind of help to streamline or continuously improve their process of paperwork, cut down their time that it would require to fill out blast reports. And so I worked on the blast crew for a number of months to figure out what they were doing, and then eventually they put me in the office and tried to develop a spreadsheet. I used Lotus 123 back in the day, not very savvy with it, so a lot of learning on my end, but eventually came to a point where you had a spreadsheet that you filled out, and as you put in some information, it would self-populate other cells, so it was more efficient, just using computer technology. And they had a laptop in the field, which was kind of a big deal back then.
Oh yeah.
In about '94, that was a pretty big deal to try to streamline their overall time, that, because they might do a couple of blasts a day, so they're trying to, shave hour off of each report or whatever. And that was the foundation. So I was working at Jacobs Ranch for about 8 months doing that. And once that was kind of completed to the level that I could take it to, they handed it off to someone that could refine it a little bit more. But Joe asked me if I wanted to stay with Intermountain Irico, and I worked there in the Powder River Basin for close to 2 years total. And then he kind of, if you will, kicked me out of the nest to say, he said, you can stay in coal, but it's not, you need to go see some other things, right? And
a lot of other blasting.
Right? You need to go see some other things. And he had chatted with a guy named Bill Lytle. Bill Lytle had a Connex North. He was the manager of Connex North, Michigan, Indiana area. And next thing you know, I was headed to Michigan for a job interview with Bill. And Connex North was a Dyno Nobel distributor as well. And so I ended up going out to Michigan and had myself and another guy, we kind of had a little site, and we did some blasting in the southeast Michigan quarry market for a Connex North. And
Little different,
right? Tons different. I mean, being a South Dakota person, I'd never been to Michigan, right? Never been to that part of the world. And so, yeah, it was definitely a good opportunity for, 25-year-old guy. That's for sure.
And I usually ask people this question: what was the moment you knew you liked and you wanted to stay in blasting? I mean, you got the mining engineering degree and you already started working, but was there a time when you were like, all right, this is for me?
Yeah.
Was there a blast that you saw, or a team that you worked with that you was like, hell yeah, this is it?
The first blast I saw was at the Black Thunder mine. I was just an intern working in their utility crew. And they'd put us out for a couple of days just for that internship to go work with the blast crew, right? And so I was out on a cast blast, and they were loading holes, and I thought, this is really pretty cool, right? Again, I'm not a forward thinker as far as this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, but I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool stuff, right? And so I would probably say that blast back then in that internship at Black Thunder was one that the light bulb started to come on just a little bit. We all have days in our career where we probably second guess our career choice and what are we doing? Especially if you have a blast maybe like in Michigan that didn't go so well, and I had a couple of those maybe that could have been better, and you're in the mine manager's office or superintendent's office kind of trying to explain some things, and those are not easy days, right? But I think once I really, being able to lead a small blast crew and initiate some blasts, and in reality, when you're driving home at the end of the day and you have successfully loaded a blast and initiated, you've provided the customer with some fragmented rock, right? I mean, there's some satisfaction at the end of the day. And I think that was the thing that kind of got me with blasting. You could really see the fruits of your labor for the day and, go home, driving home and thinking, you know what, I made a contribution today. It was a positive contribution. And I liked that aspect of blasting for sure.
I agree 100%. Like, I think when I first had the opportunity to do short-term or long-term planning, and I found out that in long-term planning, you might not even be around when that pit is mined, right? You might not even be alive by the time they get to that pit. And I couldn't do that. So when you say that, it makes sense. I think a lot of people in the explosives industry, they like to be outside, working outside, even if it's in the elements and it's cold and it's miserable or something, or hot. But they're outside in the elements, not behind a desk, or seeing the fruit of their labor, like knowing that they made that. I think that's a big factor of people in our industry.
I agree. Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned to another question that I asked, is a time when you thought this wasn't for me. You already kind of answered that on having a bad blast in Michigan. Was there another moment where you thought maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or this isn't right for me?
I think there's moments that we have, people are always a challenge when, they're just different people personalities, right? Sometimes it's not easy for, the smart Charlie with the suitcase engineer, right? That shows up on a blast, and you're working with folks that maybe don't have as much appreciation for just that engineering background, right? That we're really here to help out and contribute, and there were some of those moments where you just think, it's just really frustrating dealing with folks that maybe don't seem to appreciate the support or the value that I'm trying to provide as a team, right? I think we all probably have went through those type of situations in our career. You just simply get frustrated, and maybe you're thinking, well, maybe I should, go to a mine or something like that. But you brought up a really good point. I never really wanted to sit at the mine just doing engineering type of work. I enjoy the aspects that a drill blast scenario offers on a daily basis. There's challenges, which is good. And just being outside and interacting with folks out in that type of environment. I really do enjoy that.
If we were talking about how you got kicked out of the nest and you went to Michigan. Once you were in Michigan and you got your feet wet in the quarry business, is there a reason why you left Michigan? Were you just trying to go get your feet wet in another industry or another aspect, or what was something that was a catalyst for you to move? I mean, you've maintained a job inside dyno your entire career, which is very rare for anyone in this industry to stay with one company the entire time. I mean, I think you might be one of the few people I've ever met who does that. Not so good for you and good for Dino at the same time. I mean, the relationship was good. But a lot of times people will move to another company and do a different thing, or they'll stay at the same place and the contract will switch to a different powder company. So how was there a change from Michigan to something else? I mean, that's a benefit there, that Dino's big enough to get your feet wet in all these other industries.
Yeah, so I working in kind of the Southeast quarry market for Michigan, and then I eventually started working up in Northern Michigan. There's some larger quarries up there. There was Lafarge Cement. We started spending some more time up there as, if you will, some of our business in the northern part of Michigan grew. And that's where I became less of a, if you will, a blaster and more of a technical field representative. Working with, customers like a Lafarge Cement back in the day, or LTV Steel. They had a couple quarries up there. So, being more of a technical representative, that seemed to fit a little bit more with the engineering background, right? And I enjoyed that, learning how to run a bore track. And back then, a laser profiler, we used some of the laser Lana and the MDL units and VOD machines, those kind of things. So it seemed to be a little bit more, maybe to support the engineering background. Got a little bit more in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, working with Cliffs Iron Ore, supporting them. So again, branching out a little bit more and just working with other customers. And after about 4.5 years, there was a position that had opened up, and I moved down to Georgia. Dyno Nobel had an office outside of Atlanta. And that goal was really to work out of that office. At that time, I was really working with really the support with Lafarge Cement and some of our larger customers, and trying to support them. And it was an internal transfer down there. And there was a fellow named Dave Ogan that had encouraged that. He'd been with Dyno Nobel for a lot of years, and he was a part of the first interviews that I went with, and helped me, if you will, transfer down to that Southeast market. So spent about 6.5 years in the Southeast market, Florida, Georgia, East Tennessee, South Carolina, just supporting our customers down there.
Didn't pick up the Southern accent, though, did you?
Didn't pick up the Southern accent. Still definitely never, yeah, you're right. They always knew that I wasn't from Georgia. Let's just put it that way. But in hardworking people, great people to work with, really enjoyed working in that market, working with our customers in Florida, and just supporting that aggregate industry, right? The only thing I'll just slightly correct you on is I have been with Dyno about 29 years, but I did take a short leave.
You did? Okay.
I did, yeah, just a management change internally with Dyno Nobel, and decided I needed to make a change. And I went and worked for Cade Equipment in Salt Lake City. They sold Atlas Copco blast hole drills in that market. So I was still in the drill and blast industry, just a little bit different. And then after 3 years, and it came back to Dyno Nobel.
So you did do it.
So I did do a little bit. So I wish I could lean on what you said with being with them the entire career, but
it's not true.
It's
All
not
right,
true.
there
It's
you go.
okay.
So it makes sense.
It's okay.
I knew something would be a little weird if you did the entire time.
It's okay. It's okay. And that's okay too, right? We all could take a little bit of a break.
It's necessary.
It's necessary, right? And sometimes you realize that maybe you needed to, go back to where you came from, or maybe it's a good career path and you finish out your career, but they're all good things there.
Or management change, like you said. There's many reasons.
Many reasons.
Situations. That's funny that you did end up taking that time.
Yeah.
And was that an opportunity for you to see outside of the powderman point of view? Was that kind of a nice experience to go from an explosive supplier for a segment of your career to now being where you supplying drill? Or were you also supplying powder there as well?
No, it was just focused on drills, but the foundation of the explosives part, right? Because the drill and blast kind of go together.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you go to a mine site and you're, meeting with their pit operations guy or their engineers or whatever, right? You've got that background that, you can go out in the pit and, you know exactly what's going on with their blast. You've got intelligent questions that you could ask about, their whole drilling and blasting aspect, whether it's high wall control, fragmentation, for their ore, fragmentation for their waste. So you had a little bit broader discussion point that you could have with them, and that helped you lead them to finding the right drill that would meet those requirements that they were looking for, right? So the aspect, that foundation was very valuable in having those kind of conversations. And you chat with the drill and blast engineer, and maybe they'd ask you some questions, and you could just provide your input, right? But it definitely provided a value add discussion point for sure. Yep.
Would you say that it was an interesting, if you went from powder and you said, okay, yeah, I drilling this, I understand, where borehole deviation can come from, but then you're introduced, once you really get into drilling, you see how much, in fact, we didn't know about what the driller is doing. You're more on the fact that you have these open holes, and now we're looking at it from a loading standpoint and a blasting standpoint, but there's so many other steps in the drilling side of things that a blaster might not appreciate. Did you get any sort of realization on there, or you had already had a big foundation in drilling in advance?
No, it's a really good point, because if you're especially a blaster or loading holes, you're kind of waiting on the drill to finish up, or the holes have already been drilled out. Once you've laid out the pattern, right? Someone's drilling out the holes, next day or two, and you kind of come back once it's done. And so the big part of it was really trying to understand and appreciate the drilling aspect of it, right? I spend a lot of time with drillers in the cab, talking with them. What do they like about the machine? What do they don't? What's the challenges of drilling here? Is there a hole deviation, or how do they handle different seams or whatever, right? To try to figure out that scenario, or what the solution could be for them. So it really broadened my perspective and appreciation for drilling holes as compared to just waiting on a drill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all the technical details that can go into the rock itself, other than, there's a mud seam I need to be careful of.
Right.
That's something that I'm in the process of still learning.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at Blast Think for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future, and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.